My name is Dr. Andrew Doan. I am a grateful and enthusiastic believer in Jesus Christ. I am a 12-step ministry leader at Rancho Community Church in Temecula, California, where we meet every Thursday at 6:30 in the evenings. I'm also a medical doctor, an eye surgeon, and a doctoral degree holder in the field of neuroscience. One of the passages in the Bible that really touches my heart is from the New International Version, Luke 16:13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. In this passage, Luke is referring to God or money, but the other master could be anything. It could be our lust for anger, our codependency to those who need us and are broken, or our addictions to drug, alcohol, or video games and the internet. For most of my life, I was an atheist, so I had no foundation to build a strong mind, body, or spirit, and I felt susceptible to addictive behaviors that facilitated my escape from the life that I hated. My behavioral addiction in video games and the internet led to over 50 to 100 hours of weekly play for over 10 years. And this excessive play nearly destroyed my family, my life, my marriage, and my medical career. And at my lowest point, I contemplated killing myself. But to understand how this addictive cycle led to almost my complete destruction, let's start from the very beginning. I was from Vietnam, and I left Vietnam when I was 4 years old in 1975 when Saigon fell. During that spring, my parents knew that the military was pulling out. My dad was from the South Vietnamese Army, and there was no hope for my family to stay in Vietnam. Those that were affiliated with the South Vietnamese Army were either re-educated in these camps or were killed. My uncle, who was another officer in the South Vietnamese Army, decided to stay behind, and he was killed by his town when he returned. So my parents had to leave, but they left with a saddened heart because they also were entrepreneurs with over 12 employees, and they had to leave my grandparents behind who didn't want to leave. My grandparent, or my grandfather, who couldn't find his wife at the time during the evacuation, decided to stay behind to look for her. So to this day, I had this void in my heart because I did not grow up with loving grandparents. So my parents packed their valuables and their belongings, and we got our family together and was able to bribe our way to the Philippines. From the Philippines, we went to Wake Island, and from Wake Island, we were transferred to Camp Pendleton. There in Camp Pendleton, the first 50,000 Vietnamese arrived at what they called Tent City. And we were waiting for families and organizations and churches to sponsor us. We had a church in Aberdeen, South Dakota that sponsored my family. I find it very interesting that even though my family were not Christians, I grew up in a Buddhist background, the loving nature of that church actually planted the first seeds of knowing Jesus in my heart just from the act of sponsoring my family. So from Camp Pendleton, we went to Aberdeen, South Dakota, and Aberdeen, South Dakota was very difficult because the winters were unlike anything we've ever known. Our family was used to tropic weather, so the first winter in Aberdeen, South Dakota with sub-zero temperatures were very difficult because we didn't even know how to turn on the heat in the house. So my parents burned charcoal in the fireplace and in little barbecues to heat the house, but unfortunately the smoke would rise and then poison us with carbon monoxide poisoning. So our biggest impact in the town was not being one of the first Vietnamese families in Aberdeen. We were one of the first families that were being treated for carbon monoxide poisoning in the local hospital. So my family decided that the cold winters were not for them, and they traveled westward to Portland, Oregon. At that time, my parents decided to start a business because that's what they knew how to do best, was to be an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, because they didn't know English very well, the businesses eventually failed. But at the time, they did something unheard of. They started a Vietnamese grocery store and a Vietnamese restaurant. And in the Vietnamese grocery store, when I was about 7 years old, I remember tending to the cash register because it was a family business. We all contributed and tried to do what we can. And so when my sisters were busy and had to help with the restaurant in the back or help in stock room, I was sat at the cash register to man the cash register. And so as a young kid, I daydreamed of being an American hero. I loved the Lone Ranger and John Wayne, and so at that time I remember making paper gun holsters and paper guns and pretending like I was that Western hero. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a Asian boy, but really deep inside, I yearned to be American. I wanted to be white, and I wanted to be Caucasian like everyone else during that time in the 1970s. And I remember sitting at the cash register when two men walked into the grocery store, looked at the cash register, sees this little kid there, decides to pick up a case of beer, and they start running. Well, being that Western hero inside of my heart, I ran after them, thinking that I'm going to rescue the grocery store, think I'm going to catch them. But, of course, I fail, and I come back with no success. My sisters were angry at me, and they were concerned that I ran after these boys. But one of my sisters was very angry, and she slapped me across the face. I remember that slap clearly because I had an ear infection and the pain was excruciating. But it was a slap that woke me up because it reminded me that I am not a Western hero, I am not Caucasian, and I am just a Vietnamese immigrant boy in a family that's struggling to try to make it in the United States. Unfortunately, our grocery stores and restaurants and all the businesses my parents started failed. They didn't know American business practices and didn't know English very well, so it all failed. And really, I was failing in my life because I didn't fit in. I didn't have any Asian role models. I didn't have any Vietnamese friends, and all the Caucasian boys were constantly teasing and picking on me. But I tried to fit in the best I could. So I got into sports. I played baseball and wrestled and played football. But I remembered that while I was playing baseball, I was constantly reminded that I didn't fit in. So even though I had decent skills and I practiced really hard, and I remember that I would practice so hard that I would get holes in my jeans because I was trying to perfect the pop-up slide. And so I became one of the best base runners in baseball, and I was able to steal a lot of bases because I was quick, and I guess I was quick and agile. But I remember that while I was playing at shortstop, all the white boys would look at me and say, "Ah, Rice Patty! Did you eat your rice today, Rice Patty?" These constant teasing just gradually chipped away at my already weak ego. And it was really a difficult time growing up in the 1970s because Asian were not cool. So being Asians was not the thing to be. So when I looked in the mirror, all I could see was brown skin. I had brown skin, and I felt I was dirty because the other boys' skins were white and looked so clean. My brown eyes, were not pretty to me. They were ugly, and I wanted the beautiful blue shades that the other boys had. My name was funny because my Vietnamese name was Phuong Duc Duan, and so I was constantly picked on for my name because of the movie 16 Candles when the main characters in there picked on Long Duc Dong, so I was the Phang Duc Dong of the neighborhood. And so, looking back, it's funny, but growing up as a kid, I was incredibly insecure. And to add to my insecurities, my father, who, looking back, loved me and was very proud that I was a good base runner in baseball, but because of his actions on the sidelines, was really embarrassing to me. So during games, when I'm ready to steal a base or when I am successfully stealing a base, he would get up on the bleachers and literally take pie pans and he would clang them together, clang, 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 and he would go, "Ah, number one bass runner, you can do it, number one bass runner," and yelling at the top of his lungs. I just remembered, it's like, oh dear, just please be quiet. Those times were horrific, and it didn't help. And so what I learned how to adapt was I learned to be angry. I learned that I had a lust for anger and I had a lust to be a bully. Because if I was a bully, other kids could not pick on me. If I was a bully, other kids had no chance because I could pick out their weaknesses before they picked out mine, and I could attack them. And so those times were very difficult for me because being a bully adds to also my guilt and my my insecurities, because I didn't want to be someone who other people hated. I wanted to be someone who people loved and accepted. And so being a bully was not the answer. But I remember vividly one day when I was walking the hallways and had my Letterman's jacket on and I was walking with the jocks in the hallway, and I saw this overweight Christian boy who I really yearned deep inside to be like him because he had so much self-confidence. And so I walked up to him and I was trying to call him names, but it didn't affect him. So being a bully, I'm like, well, I'm going to hit you in the chest. So I pop him in the chest, and the next thing I know is that he falls to the ground and he starts seizing and he starts foaming at the mouth. My heart stopped, and what seemed like hours was only seconds when he finally recovered. And what I realized today is that action stopped his heart. That thump in the chest stopped his heart, and that I could have killed another young man, that I probably would have went to jail or juvenile hall, and my chances of being a doctor today would be non-existent. And so really, without Christ, I dove deeper and deeper into the cycle of being angry and being a bully. And my parents, who were immigrants to this country, said, well, don't use drugs and alcohols, because if you do, you'll have no future. But here's all these video games you want. So they allowed me to play Atari, Commodore 64, Nintendo, Sega, and really I had years and years and over 30 years of game playing. But when I went to college and then finally to medical school, and God blessed me with a near photographic memory, so school was not hard for me. So literally I was bored in school, but these video games provided challenge. In these games, I could be a general. I could be the greatest thing in my mind. I could conquer other people. I could be that bully too. I could beat up on people and hear their anguish and their anger and their yelling at me. And I fed on that, because it's like, here I am. In real life, if I am a bully, I could kill somebody. So I learned to modify my behavior and said, well, I'll kill people in the virtual world. I'll go online and be the #1 person in playing StarCraft, and I would be the #1 person in playing Diablo, and I would set up, scenarios to basically be able to win and beat people and steal from them and hear their anger, and it just fed this addictive cycle of playing more and more and more. But what I didn't realize, that what I was chasing was really challenges, purpose, love, acceptance, and feeling like someone that mattered. But I also had an idol, because I wanted to feel godly. And so these video games allowed me to feel godly. Now, these video games are very similar to what B.F. Skinner did in 1930s with the Skinner rat box experiment. In this model, what he had was a lever in the box and then a little rat. The little rat would come by, see the lever, push the lever, and got a food reward. Then the rat learned that pushing the lever gave him a food reward. B.F. Skinner then switched to sugar water. Pushed the lever, got sugar water. Rat learned lever equals sugar water. Then he made it a variable reward, where sometimes you pushed a lever, you only got intermittent reward. This is the same model of why slot machines are so successful, because when we pull the lever on the slot machine, sometimes you get the high reward, which is the jackpot. So that reinforced the lever pushing behavior more. This is very similar to video games, clicking the mouse to look at porn on the internet, social media, Facebook likes. All these things are pushing levers to feed a dopamine cycle in the brain to make me feel good, to make me feel high, and then to make me not depressed. So that lever pushing behavior on the mouse to play video games was my digital antidepressant, and I was addicted to that. That led to 50 to 100 hours of playing. That took a toll on my family because I slept only 2 to 3 hours a night. I was chronically tired. I had hemorrhoids and urinary incontinence because I would sit for hours and hours in front of the computer all day long, all night long to play these games, and I couldn't leave and pause the game because they were live action matches. If I had left the game, I would lose. So therefore, I didn't want to lose. So therefore, I stayed for 2 hours playing a game even though I had to use the restroom. And then I developed obesity because I didn't work out anymore. I was athletic in college and high school, but I lost that in medical school, and I was 30 pounds more overweight than I was now. And then eventually I developed carpal tunnel that went from this finger all the way to my forearm. And I had to take maximum anti-inflammatory medications just to write in the medical chart and also to function as an eye surgeon. Eventually, I developed an armpit hair infection that went down this way because of my lack of hygiene playing excessively on the internet. And so my total right arm was completely shot. My wife was devastated because I became physically and emotionally abusive. At one point, she was rolling back and forth in a fetal position in the closet, crying because she married a monster. She finally left me and separated from me, filed a restraining order, filed for divorce, and filed for custody of the kids. At that point, I was devastated. I had no friends. I played 50 to 100 hours a week on the computer. I had no connection to the real world. I was contemplating suicide. But the church that sponsored my family and my friends who were Christians reminded me that there could be a God. I prayed that if there is any God, please help, because I'm broken. I need redemption, but I'll promise to serve you if you just fix this thing that I cannot fix. My wife, out of the goodness of her heart, started praying for me and also prayed for our family. She also agreed to come back if we go to church. And so we went back to church, and our journey has been incredible. Through God, He finally healed my mind, my body, my spirit. Through the church, He finally healed my relationship with my wife and my kids. And through God, I finally defeated my addiction, and I focused on rebuilding my medical career, my marriage, and my relationships with my family. And through God, I was able to be involved with the church. And now I'm living a life of purpose. And I love serving as a 12-step ministry leader at Rancho Community Church because I'm now able to walk with others. And my favorite step in all the 12 steps is really step 12. And in 12 steps, we go through this process of finding the Lord and letting the Lord heal us. The 12th step states, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. According to Celebrate Recovery, the Bible passage that matches this step is from Galatians 6:1 in the New International Version. Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently, but watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. I love this step because by serving others, we are also very reminded on a daily basis that we can be susceptible to our sinful nature and our addictions. So the question I ask people is, how do we unlearn riding a bike? The answer is that we can't. Once we know how to ride a bike, our brain has hardwired to know how to ride that bike. So when we learn that to ride a bike at 6 years old, we will still know how to ride a bike at 90 if we are capable of riding that bike physically. So really the key to addictive behaviors and modifying our life is through having a relationship with God. Because through God, we now have a strong mind, strong body, and strong spirit that allows us to modify our addictive behaviors. I have urges to game. I have urges to gamble. I have urges to be on the internet. But because I am serving God in a purpose filled life, I don't have time for those addictive behaviors anymore. So through God, I have been able to really have a blessed life. And so now, in addition to serving as a father, a loving husband, and also a ministry leader in my church, I am also an entrepreneur and I'm creating jobs in my town. I created an eye clinic to serve the church through the rescue mission. I also have started a publishing company and I've done other things that are now God honoring. And the way I view business is really a business ministry that I'm able to support and provide for other families. But my day job is being an eye surgeon, and I get to touch people's lives on a daily basis by restoring sight and by helping them see. And this has been such an incredible journey because I know I am not worthy. I know that for me, in my sinful state, that I'm not worthy of any of this, but only through the grace of God that He has blessed me with all these things and have allowed me to be a steward. So I am glad to serve Him, and I am glad to serve God as my only master because through Him I have been able to live such a fulfilled and blessed life. If you need more information on video games, internet, or gambling addictions, please go to my website at hookedongames.com or you can contact me directly at andrew-doan.com. Thank you for letting me share, and I appreciate you. Thank you.